somebody commented on one of my videos asking if I have any recommendations for no spice books, and after perusing all of the books that I've read in 2025, I actually have 9 books that I'm going to share with you today. Let's just start with the very first book, and it is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. I feel like anytime I talk about this book, I always have to point out that I got this book for $5 at Barnes & Noble, and it also has the pretty sprayed edges. It is about Liz and Wes, who have been neighbors ever since they were kids, and Liz just doesn't like Wes that much because he always pranks her. And even though they've been friends forever, neighbors forever, she just doesn't really hang out with him a lot. She usually hangs out with like a small group of friends, while Wes is actually a pretty popular guy, I guess, in her school. On their first day of their senior year, she found out that Michael, who used to live in the neighborhood and also her childhood crush, moved back into the neighborhood and actually going to spend his senior year at the same school that everybody in the neighborhood goes to. She also realized that because Wes is popular and friendly, he just clicked right away with Michael. And if Liz wants to get closer to Michael, she has to ask Wes for help. And because Wes is naturally a nice guy, he wants to help her out. And after spending a lot of time hanging out with Wes and like his friends, going to high school parties and stuff like that, Liz realized that Wes is not all bad and he actually could be a nice person, and she's also enjoying the time that they spend together. That's just the gist of the book. I would leave the rest so you can read the book on your own. The second book that I recently read was The Romance Rivalry by Susan Lee. This is about Irene and Aiden, who are actually online book reviewers, and they only review romance novels, which is really interesting, especially for a guy, because I feel like it's not really the usual thing that they would read and also post about it online. That is what I feel like makes this book a little bit more interesting to me. But anyways, they're not really the best of friends, because anytime Irene likes a book, Aiden would then also post about the same book, but he would hate it. And if Irene would hate a book, he would post that he would like it. So I feel like that's where Irene just kind of doesn't like the way he posts his reviews right after her review, and it would always be the total opposite of what Irene would post. But the story got interesting because on the first day of college, Irene found that Aiden is actually going to the same college as she is, and to make things worse, they actually are taking a class together, and they also got paired up to do a group project together. And the more time they spend together, Irene actually is looking at him differently, and they share some kind of like common interests and also common like drama with their family. So that's how they got closer. And I have to tell you that the chapter of this book is named after like a trope in romance novel. So you would see things like fake dating, opposites attract, workplace romance, age gap romance as the name of the chapter on this book, and I think that is really cute. The next book that I have is XOXO by XCO. This is also another most recent read for me. I think I read this maybe in May, and I just fell in love with XCO's writing. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I cannot wait to read the companion book for this one called ASAP. And I also bought another one of her books that is actually YA fantasy, and I cannot wait to read all of them. And I know she's only been writing YA novels, and I'm hoping that sometime soon she would also start dabbling in the adult romance novel. But anyways, this book is about Jenny and Jae-woo, who kind of met by chance. He was actually renting a room in a karaoke place of Jenny's uncle, and Jenny's uncle actually sent her to let him know that his time is up and that he needs to basically get out so they can put in a new customer in that room. He left, and they actually met again on the same night when Jenny was going home. They actually ended up just kind of hanging out around K-Town in LA and going around different places, trying out different like food, because they were having some type of like festival or something in K-Town. For some reason, Jenny was able to kind of tell him some of like her life story, even though he was still being mysterious. And she found out that this is like his last night in LA and he needs to go back to Seoul, Korea, which is where he lives. Anyways, a few days after that, Jenny also found out that her grandma is sick in Korea and that her mom is planning to spend a few months helping to take care of the grandma. And because Jenny doesn't want to stay in America alone, she decided to transfer for a few months into this international music school in Korea, which is actually pretty awesome. And I feel like that has become a popular theme on some of these YA books and YA like TV shows. And I'm wondering if you guys are familiar with like boarding school in Korea and if it's actually true that they do have international boarding school. That is just an interesting thing to know. Anyways, if you know, let me know in the comment below. Anyways, Jenny went to Korea and on the first day, she actually saw a music video of this new K-pop band and one of the guys is actually Jae-woo. And on the first day of her moving into her dorm, she also found that Jae-woo actually goes to the same school as she does. So from then on, story gets really interesting. There's a lot of fun family in this book and I just really love this book. I'm hoping that the other book, SAP, is gonna have the same vibe. It's gonna be about a different character that you do see in this book, so I can't wait to read that one. The next book in line that I have is You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. This is the book that I've been trying to avoid reading for a long time because I know that this book is about grief and I know that it's probably gonna be a sad book. Premise is that Julie just lost her boyfriend Sam. At first, she just didn't want to deal with him passing. She didn't talk to her friends, she didn't talk to her mom about it, she didn't even go to the funeral. And one day, she was kind of like desperate to just hang on to the last thing about Sam, and she was actually going to the cemetery where he was buried and she was trying to find out where like his burial site is because she didn't go to the funeral, so she doesn't know. In the middle of trying to figure out where he is, she got stuck in a rainstorm and she was just so, I guess, sad and she wants to talk to somebody and she doesn't know who to talk to because she basically cut off her friends because that's just the way she wanted to grieve, I guess. So she decided to just pick up the phone and call Sam's number, knowing that no one's gonna pick up. However, after a couple rings, somebody picked up the phone and it was actually Sam. So there is some magical realism in this book, and basically throughout the book it talks about the conversation that they were having on the phone, and it was actually a pretty good story. I was just reading it with like a heavy heart because I know she is grieving her boyfriend. This is how she's dealing with her grief. It wasn't a sad book per se, but I know toward the end of the book there is this one sad part, a sad reveal, I want to say, and that is when I broke down and cried. So it's not really a sad book throughout the whole book, but just toward the end it is pretty sad. I really love the writing and I do have another Dustin's book in my library somewhere and I definitely want to read it hopefully soon. I also pre-ordered his third book that is coming out, I think, in the fall, and hopefully I'll be able to read the second one before that book came out. Next book that I have is The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. This is the first book in the summer trilogy, I guess. I actually read this book in almost like one sitting, I want to say, definitely within 24 hours. And if you're not familiar with this book, this has become a TV show in Hulu with the same, I think, name, I believe, The Summer I Turned Pretty. The third and final season is coming, I think, in June or July, I think, and I'm hoping that I'm able to finish all of the books hopefully by then so I can finally watch the show. And I know I'm pretty late to the game, but I think it's still okay. The whole series is basically about Belly and her summers. She usually spends her summers at Cousins Beach at her mom's friend's summer house. Belly, her brother, I forgot his name, and then Conrad and Jeremiah usually hang out every single summer together. And because she's the only girl, sometimes she hangs out with them, but sometimes they also leave her out of things because she's a girl. And this summer, it's a little bit different because this is the summer that she turned pretty. I know what you might think, that this book might just be about a girl crushing on like her childhood friends and all of the summer that she spent with the boys. but there's also a little bit more in-depth to it about the moms and the dads and just kind of their whole dynamic and relationships. I know I'm not the target audience for this book and for the whole series, but I still really enjoyed it, and I feel like if I were to grow up here in America, this would be my summer. This is how I would spend my summer, maybe going out to the beach with like family friends and hang out with the kids and all of that. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to read the second and third book before the third season comes out, but I'm not making any promises. This next 4 books I would say is general fiction and definitely have no spice. And the first book is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I know that this book was really popular, I think, during the pandemic, but I just read it recently. I tabbed it so much. I don't know if you can tell, and also I don't know on the top if you can tell, but there's some tabs up here as well. But this is basically about Nora, who was definitely giving up on her life. She fell into depression, and one night she just decided to take a bunch of sleeping pills, hoping that something would happen. She kind of ended up in a limbo between like life and death, because when she wakes up, she was standing in front of this big library, which is called, the Midnight Library. She doesn't know what to do, so she went in and she actually met the librarian from the Midnight Library, who's actually the librarian in her school when she was in middle school. And the librarian explained to her that this Midnight Library is filled with books of her possible other lives. So with thousands and maybe millions or maybe infinite like options, she can pick up a book and try out a different life of hers, and if she wants to live there, she could. And honestly, to me, that sounds pretty interesting. It sounds like you kind of get a second chance on life. And the way that this librarian told her about like how to start is to pick a regret from her life and try to fix it, which I think that is something super relatable to any one of us. But anyway, she gets to try, I believe, 10 different lives in this book, which is what I tap on the top. And I just feel like there's just so many like wisdom and life lessons in this book. The next one is A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. I read this book, I want to say back in 2019, maybe 2020, I don't remember, but definitely at the time when I wanted to start reading again, but not last year. One of the friends that I made here on YouTube recommended this book for me because she said that this is her favorite book. After reading this book, I could say the same. This is one of the books that I would always recommend to people because the story is just really heartwarming, very wholesome. You just don't expect the main character Ove to build the relationships that he's building throughout this book. Basically, it's about a guy named Ove. He's grumpy, he's old. The beginning of the book is kind of morbid in my opinion, but that is just how it started. And in the beginning of the book, we got introduced to a family who is moving right across the street from Ove's house, and they basically live in an HOA community. Technically, by the HOA law, you're not supposed to drive in front of the alleyway, like it's only supposed to be for like pedestrian or something. But this family actually bring in their big ass U-Haul truck, their moving truck, into the front street, and he got super pissed about it. And basically it is how the story starts and how he get to know his neighbor, also some other characters from his past lives, his origin story of how he became so grumpy. There's also 2 movie adaptations of this book. The first one is the Swedish version, and the second one is the American version, who is actually played by Tom Hanks. I would say both of the movies are a pretty good adaptation from the book. I don't think they miss a lot of story from the book, but the original movie, the Swedish version, is definitely better. I would watch both of them. But anyways, make sure to add this to your TBR, and if you have read this book and watched the movies, let me know which one you prefer. The next book that I want to recommend is Natalie Tan's Book of Luck and Fortune by Roselle Lim. This is also the book that I recently read, I think sometime in the end of May or something. At first, this book is kind of hard to get into because the first few chapters, the way that she wrote it is a little bit more, I don't know, lyrical or something. I don't know, it was just kind of hard to understand. But after you pass the first few chapters, like the writing are kind of like back to normal day-to-day conversation, which is kind of weird to me. But anyways, this is about Natalie, who have moved out of her childhood home in San Francisco Chinatown for 7 years. And in the beginning of the book, we learn that her mom passed away, so she is going back to her childhood home to kind of wrap things up, perform like the funeral services and all of that. And you can tell that she is Chinese, and her neighbors basically were helping her out to do some of the rituals because they're a lot and they're a bit different than like the usual average like American funeral services and rituals. She decided this time that she's gonna stay home and actually reopen her grandma's restaurant that she inherited when her mom passed away. Well, at first she didn't really know how to go about it because she's not a entrepreneur. She learned to become a chef, not through formal education. Like, she didn't go to a culinary school. She kind of went, but then she failed. But she basically traveled around the world, and that is how she learned how to cook. And she went to this neighborhood fortune teller, and the lady, Miss Yu, was saying that she has to help 3 people in order for her restaurant to be successful when she decided to open it. And along the way, she actually kind of like reconnected with her neighbors from like her childhood, and also met new people. And this book also has some found family elements in it. And towards the end of the book, there's like this very sad but also very happy reveal that made me cry. And this is why I decided that I love this book. I love Roselle's writing. I have her other 2 books in the same universe. Last but not least, I have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. A lot of people are saying that this book is really good and it's one of their favorites, and I decided to read it. And again, this is one of the books that I actually read almost in one sitting, maybe like within 24 hours. And this book is so easy to read because the format is of like magazine interviews. Obviously you can't see it, but basically we learn about the band The Six and also the solo singer Daisy Jones, and how at that time in the 70s the label wants to kind of put them together, and then they became Daisy Jones and the Six. And we learn about who they are, how their characters are, and like how their personality looks like throughout these interviews. The book is really easy to read if you want kind of like a palate cleanser or something quick to read. I would highly recommend this book. The ending is actually kind of surprising. It's not really predictable. Like, I kind of know and have like a little hunch about the ending, but there's another part of the ending that is a surprise for me. So it's actually a really good read. And now that I've read this book, I can actually watch the Prime Video show because I've watched the trailers when the show first came out, and I've been wanting to watch it, but I want to hold off until I finish reading the book. Anyways, those are the 9 books that I've read so far that has no spice. Hopefully one of these or a few of these would pique your interest and you would add it to your TBR.